Well, I am going to ask in Crawford. I mean, we've had a lot of lunar missions attempted and landing exceeding design requirements. Is that going to ruin the signal you're going to look for?
Do we have a roving microphone? Oh, I see. Okay. So the question was about contamination. Was that right? Yes. So of course, if we find some strange titanium aluminium alloy on the moon, then the most likely thing is it's going to be a terrestrial contaminant, because we've already crashed lots of titanium aluminium alloys onto the moon. I think the next step, though, would be to look at the isotope ratios. If the aluminium and titanium the alloys made out of have come from another planetary system, the isotope ratios are likely to be different, because they'd be non-solar system ratios. So obviously finding something in the regolith would just start a long chain of analysis that one would have to go through to rule out.
That we move towards Artemis with really a very strong human component, also addressing the aspect of science on the moon, life science on the moon. So I would like to ask you, how can we test better this aspect of humans that are going to perform this investigation with the proper tools, with the proper methodology, also with the medical expertise, which I think will have to be addressed to keep them alive, keep them performant, effective. So how could we work more integrated, involving, for instance, this human aspect, neuroscience operations in a field where before we were more working as a geologist or physicist?
I can just say a few words. It's a big question. It could take an entire conference probably to address. But I think that there are 2 points. First is the interaction between different communities, because sometimes the geologists, the astronomers we know, and let's say the engineers for the space missions and the medical doctors, all these communities has to work a lot together to really put in place this kind of, let's say, activities and programs. The other, I think it's, we have to focus, of course, on, let's say, what we have here on Earth to learn from it, but also to be very careful, to be focused, and to have real science going on in terms of connecting lunar science to what we do here on Earth. I think these are the 2 things, but it's a matter of space agencies to invest and continue on this path, and it's challenging.
From my side, from the part of medical aspect, we make some proposal to our Italian agency in order to study, for example, the mechanism of biological aging during the space mission. And so we study with this specific argument and try to find and try to find something to slow down the aging that is increased during this kind of flight. So we make 2 kind of proposal. One is to study better the diet and the nutrition during this specific flight, and to measure in the same time the biological aging and follow the biological aging of astronaut or analog astronaut too. The other one is on bed rest experiment, where we try to find what is the damage to the body when a person is without is under microgravity. So we need a lot of contribution and found on this.
I will just add that on this technology side, I believe that in the long term, we will need harmonization, interoperability. because if it's true that in the 60s was, I mean, there was only one entity doing it, so there wasn't this issue. Now it might be not for the short term, but for the long term, for having sustainability also for any possible systems might be sent from not only agencies, but also commercial parties and research institutes. So interoperability.
I'm Zizong Kang from China University of Sciences. Actually, I feel the FI presentation looks quite interesting. Because I only have time for one question, so I would like to ask the last two presenters about the training program with technology. Actually, the ideal situation for the human exploration nowadays is if we can send a geologist on the moon, so we can trust his decision on specific missions. But now the question is, do we have a threshold between the knowledge of the astronaut acquired from the geological background and also the technology can help them to make the decision? So what would be the threshold? I mean, the maximum knowledge the astronaut can acquire with the aid of the technology, so we can trust his decision on site. So can we answer this question now, or maybe in the next few years we can do it? Thank you.
It's a very good point, I think. Of course, we know that from the Apollo time, but also in general, humans have much more potential in interpretation of the environment and based on previous experience. Okay, so of course, field geology, everybody probably there are field geologists in the room knows that most of the knowledge comes from direct experience before. So there is of course a theoretical basis, but there is a lot related to previous experience in ability to recognize features and things that of course machine learning and technology will enhance, but will never at the moment completely substitute. So let's say that these two lines goes in parallel. We do not need to have an astronaut which is a super expert in geochemistry. Okay, we need to have an astronaut that is very good in finding something that is looking what we expect and identifying something that is completely different from what we expect. So it's kind of an ability for exploration, really, to describe, identify features. Then the technology comes as an help, because of course there are things that we cannot see, there are things that with our senses we cannot really identify, and so spectrometers, other kind of tools, microscopes, there is a lot that can give to you the answer. Would we take this rock or this rock? So the threshold is not clear, of course, but I think it goes on a parallel lines, because there will be also there is no sense completely to cut off the science community from ground. The science community from ground, of course, probably will not be so quickly reactive to provide decisions, but still can provide a lot of inputs for the next traverse, for example. So it depends on different levels, and both things goes together, I think.
So time's running on, so I'd like to close this session and thank all the speakers again for the next session.